Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling the power of now today. Eckhart Tolle's book. It's been one of those books I've meant to read forever, but honestly, I was kind of intimidated to actually, dive in.
Yeah, I get that. It can seem a bit daunting at first.
It can. And even the title, The Power of Now, it sounds so abstract, but going through your notes, I gotta say, I'm hooked.
You're in for a treat, honestly.
Yeah.
What I love about Tolle is how he takes these profound spiritual ideas and makes them feel, relevant to our lives.
Yeah, totally. I think that's what's drawn so many people to it. It's not just fluffy philosophy, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's got this practical edge, and that's what we're going to focus on in our deep dive today, right? We're going to unearth those, practical nuggets, the stuff that can actually help us navigate the chaos of being human.
Yeah, let's take Tolle's ideas out of the clouds and bring them down to earth. See how they work in the real world. And I think there's no better place to start than with this concept of the mind trap.
Okay, so the mind trap. I remember getting stuck on that one too at first. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm stuck in my head, but Tolle really gets into how this plays out in our lives,
He does. It's really insightful.
He uses that example, remember, with the phrase, I can't live with myself. It's simple, but it really reveals how we separate ourselves from our thoughts.
Yeah, it's brilliant how he does that. That phrase, it just shows the illusion.
Right.
If you can't live with yourself, there's got to be two of you. There's the I that's observing and the self that's being judged.
Right, right. So we end up mistaking those thoughts, that constant chatter, for who we actually are.
Exactly.
And that's the trap, right?
Yeah, that's the trap.
We get lost in the worries, the planning, the regrets, all those mental stories, and we end up missing out on actually experiencing this moment. How many times have you caught yourself replaying a conversation in your head or stressing about something that hasn't even happened?
Oh, all the time. It's like a default setting for the human mind, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To get caught up in that mental chatter.
It really is. But what I thought was interesting is that Tolle isn't saying we should try to eliminate thought altogether. He's more focused on this idea of becoming aware of it. Noticing the patterns, realizing we have a choice in how we relate to those thoughts.
Right. It's about developing a conscious relationship with your mind.
Yeah.
Instead of being run by it, you become the observer.
So it's not about silencing the mind. It's about creating space between us and our thoughts so we can observe them without getting completely swept away. But, this all sounds a bit abstract. How do we actually do that?
Well, imagine you're sitting by a busy highway. All those cars, they represent your thoughts. They're zooming by, creating all this noise and commotion. Now, you can either get caught up in the traffic, feeling overwhelmed and stressed, or you can choose to just observe it from the side of the road.
Right.
You're still aware of the cars, but they're not running you over.
Ah, I see. So we're developing that witness consciousness, as he calls it, that ability to just step back and observe without judgment.
Exactly. And that's what frees us from the trap.
Okay, so that's the trap. But then he introduces this whole idea of the power of now. And that's where it starts to get really interesting.
It does. It's not just about recognizing the trap. It's about discovering a whole new way to experience life, to connect to a deeper level of being, a level that's always there.
He talks about finding this narrow gate that leads to life, a gate called now. It's such a vivid image, but what does he actually mean by the now?
Yeah. He's not saying that we should ignore the past or future.
Yeah.
But that the only true reality is this present moment, the now. That's where life is actually happening.
So everything else is just a story.
Yeah. It's memory or anticipation, stuff our minds have created. The now is where we find true peace, joy, and aliveness.
I'm thinking about that feeling when you're completely absorbed in something. Maybe you're painting, listening to music, having a deep conversation. There's this sense of timelessness where the mind isn't racing. You're fully present.
Yes. Those are those moments of flow, of complete absorption in the present. They give us a glimpse into what it means to tap into the power of man.
So the more we cultivate that ability to access this state, the more we bring that awareness and aliveness into everything we do.
Exactly. It's like trading that constant mental noise for a much richer, more vibrant experience of reality.
And this is where it starts to get really practical. But Tolle introduces another concept that kind of throws me off. The pain body. It sounds kind of ominous. What is that exactly, and why should we care about it?
Well, he describes it as this, accumulation of old emotional pain that we carry around unconsciously, like a shadow self. Think of it as a dense energy field that can influence our thoughts, emotions, and even our actions.
Okay, so we all have baggage, past hurts, traumas, disappointments. But how does this pain body actually affect us day to day?
Imagine this. You're having a great morning, and suddenly someone cuts you off in traffic.
Right.
You feel this surge of anger, maybe even road rage, that intense reaction. It might seem justified in the moment, but what's really happening is that external event has triggered your pain body, bringing up all those old feelings, frustration, resentment, maybe even helplessness.
So instead of reacting to the situation calmly, we're actually reacting from this place of accumulated pain,
Exactly.
blowing things out of proportion.
And Tolle says the pain body actually feeds on those negative experiences.
Oh, wow.
It gets stronger every time we unconsciously identify with it. It's like a gremlin that wants to keep us trapped in suffering.
Okay, so understanding this pain body is crucial. If we're not aware of it, it can really hijack our emotions, sabotage our relationships. But how do we even know when it's activated?
Pay attention to when you feel a sudden shift in your energy, like this surge of negativity that feels out of proportion to what's actually happening. Notice the thoughts and stories that come up in your mind. Are you blaming yourself? Are you blaming others? Are you dwelling on past hurts? Are you feeling victimized? Those are all signs that the pain body might be at play.
So awareness is the first step. But what do we do once we realize it's happening? How do we stop it from taking over?
That's where the power of now comes in, by bringing our attention to the present moment, to the sensations in our body, to our breath. We create that space between ourselves and the pain body. We observe it without judgment, without getting swept away by its story.
When you were talking about the pain body, I was just thinking about this time. I totally lost it over spilled coffee.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was like all this frustration from work just kind of exploded. And looking back, it really had nothing to do with the coffee itself.
Yeah, that's a classic example of the pain body kind of hijacking a situation. It's rarely about the actual coffee, but more about whatever's going on underneath.
Totally. Okay, so we're getting better at spotting those pain body moments, but what do we do about it? How do we stop feeding it? It feels like this vicious cycle. The more we react, the stronger it gets.
Right. That's where this idea of surrender comes in. And this is a tricky one. It's not about just passively accepting whatever happens.
Right.
It's about aligning ourselves with a deeper wisdom, a flow that's bigger than our own minds.
So a lot of people misunderstand surrender, right? Like they think it means weakness or giving up. But you're saying it's actually a source of strength.
Exactly. It's about letting go of control. That need to control every outcome, that tight grip on how we think things should be. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best thing to do is just step back, observe, allow things to unfold.
And that really ties back to the power of now, right? When we're so focused on controlling the future, we miss what's right in front of us.
Yeah. And remember, surrender doesn't mean we become passive. It's about taking action, but from a place of alignment, not from a place of fear or resistance.
Okay, so it's not about inaction. It's about conscious action. But how do we actually practice surrender? It still seems a bit abstract.
Well, one way is to start paying attention to areas in your life where you're resisting the flow. Maybe it's a relationship that's clearly over, or maybe you're forcing a career path that just isn't working.
Yeah, those situations where you just feel the tension.
Exactly. Notice those points of resistance, the places where you're holding your breath. Clenching your jaw, that knot in your stomach. Those are often signs you're trying to force things.
So surrender is about noticing those patterns and then having the courage to let go, to trust that maybe there's a bigger picture.
Yes. And it's not always easy. I mean, it can be scary to let go of control. But, Tolle says that through surrender, we can enhance our consciousness.
We're stepping out of the driver's seat and trusting there's a more skilled navigator guiding us. This makes me think about how Tolle applies all this to relationships. It's so easy to get caught up in our own needs and use others as a means to an end.
Oh, yeah. He's spot on about that. Think about times when you're in a relationship and you're just fixated on what the other person can do for you. How they can make you feel loved or secure or complete.
So we end up treating them like a tool to fix our own stuff, instead of seeing them as a whole person.
Exactly. And that's where the connection breaks down. Tolle's point is that true intimacy, it comes from recognizing the shared being in others, meeting them in the present moment, without trying to change them or use them to fill our own needs.
So letting go of our expectations.
Yeah.
And just appreciating them for who they are.
Yeah. But that takes a lot of presence, right?
It does.
You have to quiet your mind, truly see the other person.
And not project all your stuff onto them.
Right. It's about meeting them in that space of shared presence, in the now. And that's where the magic happens. Deep listening, genuine curiosity, allowing the other person to be themselves without judgment.
So we're stepping out of our mental prisons and
Yeah.
connecting on a deeper level.
Exactly. A soul level.
But that's easier said than done. I mean, life throws us curveballs, you know?
Yeah.
What happens when we face really challenging situations, those limit situations, as Tolle calls them?
Well, he doesn't sugarcoat things. He acknowledges that life can be tough, you know, and those limit situations, those moments of crisis, extreme challenge, they can really shake us up, shatter those illusions of control.
I can relate to that. A few years back, I went through this period. It was job loss, health scare, family crisis, all within a few months. It felt like everything was falling apart. It was a real test.
Wow. Yeah, those are the times when those old patterns, the fear, resistance, self-blame, they can really take over.
They do.
But Tolle suggests that these limit situations,
Yeah.
as painful as they are, they also offers incredible opportunities for growth, for transformation. He uses this like really brilliant metaphor of a diamond being formed under immense pressure. Those difficult experiences, those moments of pressure, they help us shed old beliefs, limiting beliefs, and we emerge stronger, more resilient.
So instead of avoiding or resisting those challenges, we should lean into them.
Yeah.
All seems kind of counterintuitive.
It is. He says those limit situations, they can produce miracles. It's when we surrender, let go of that need to control. That's when we discover a strength and resilience that we never knew we had.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly.
But Tolle's taking it a step further. He's saying we can actually use those experiences to connect with a deeper part of ourselves.
Yes. He talks about how when there's no way out, there's a way through. It's a message of hope.
Yeah.
You know, even when we feel lost and alone, that power of now, it's always there waiting to guide us back to wholeness.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we cultivate that trust, especially in the middle of chaos?
It takes practice. You know, Tolle encourages things like meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature.
Being out in nature definitely helps.
It does. These practices help us connect with that deeper dimension of being, that stillness within that never changes, even when everything around us is falling apart.
It's like anchoring ourselves in that inner space, that source of peace that can get us through anything.
Yeah, and from that grounded space, we can act in a world with more clarity, more wisdom, more compassion. We can respond to those challenges with more presence and effectiveness.
Okay, so we've talked about surrender, facing those limit situations, but what about taking action in the world? How does that fit into this whole power of now thing? So we've talked about surrender, about facing those limit situations, but what about taking action in the world? How does that fit into this whole power of now thing?
That's a great question. You know, Tolle doesn't advocate for just withdrawing from the world and becoming a hermit. He actually emphasizes that the real transformation happens when we bring this awareness, this presence into our actions.
So it's not about escaping reality, it's about engaging with it, but from a different place, right?
Exactly. It's about acting from a place of presence, of alignment with our true nature, rather than from that place of ego, fear, and separation.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all the pieces fit together here, but there's one more big idea in the power of now that I want to talk about. Tolle's vision of a new consciousness. It sounds kind of like utopian, but it's also really relevant to, you know, all the challenges we're facing in the world today.
Yeah, it's a bold vision and one that's often misunderstood. Tolle isn't talking about some future utopia like magically appearing. He's talking about a fundamental shift in human awareness, moving away from that ego-driven thinking towards a deeper understanding of our interconnectedness.
You know, whenever I hear that phrase, new consciousness, I think of those like cheesy sci-fi movies where everyone suddenly gets telepathic powers. But Tolle's vision is more grounded than that, right?
Oh, definitely. It's not about supernatural abilities. It's about a shift in perception, recognizing that we're not these isolated individuals, competing for resources, but that we're part of like a larger interconnected web of life.
He talks about how the 20th century, it saw this unprecedented level of violence, right? Over 100 million people killed by other humans. And he sees that as a symptom of what he calls egoic consciousness, that state of separation and fear that drives conflict and destruction.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of what happens when we live in a state of disconnection. When we see ourselves as separate from others, it's easier to justify harming them, exploiting them, dehumanizing them.
And Tolle's argument is that this egoic consciousness, it's not our true nature. It's just a conditioned way of thinking, a pattern of behavior that we can unlearn.
Exactly. He believes that beneath the surface, there's this deeper dimension of being, a state of awareness that recognizes our fundamental interconnectedness with all life.
Okay, so the egoic consciousness is the problem. It's driving all this conflict and suffering. But what's the solution? How do we cultivate this new consciousness?
It starts with our own awakening,
Yeah.
individually. It's about becoming the watcher of our minds, disidentifying from the thoughts and emotions that keep us trapped in those patterns of fear and separation.
He talks a lot about becoming the observer, the witness, but that can be so hard to do. Our minds are always chattering, pulling us in a million different directions.
It takes practice, yeah. But the thing to remember is that we're not our thoughts. We're the awareness that's observing them. And through practices like meditation, mindfulness, and just, bringing more awareness into our daily lives, we can create that space between us and the mental noise.
It's about creating that sense of separation, right? That spaciousness, where we can observe those thoughts and emotions without getting carried away by them.
Exactly. And when we do that, something amazing happens. We start to tap into this deeper dimension of ourselves, this state of peace and stillness that's always there, regardless of what's going on externally.
I think about those times when I'm out in nature, hiking in the woods, or sitting by the ocean. There's this feeling of expansiveness, of connection to something larger than myself. Is that what Tully's getting at?
Absolutely. Nature has this incredible way of reminding us of our interconnectedness, helping us access that state of awe and wonder that goes beyond the limitations of the egoic mind.
So cultivating this new consciousness, it's not about just sitting on a meditation cushion or going off to a monastery. It's about bringing that awareness into everything we do.
Yes, exactly.
It's about being more present in our relationships, more mindful in our work, more connected to nature. It's about embodying love, compassion, and understanding in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not about waiting for some big external event to trigger some global shift. It's about becoming the change we want to see, starting right here, right now.
And Tolle believes that as more and more people awaken to this new consciousness, it'll create this ripple effect, transforming our reality, our collective reality.
He doesn't really lay out a blueprint for what that new world will look like, though, does he?
No, he doesn't. And I think that's intentional. He believes that the details will emerge organically as more people wake up to their true nature. He focuses more on those underlying principles, the shift in consciousness.
He does talk about a future where work is aligned with our passions, where we live in harmony with nature, and where relationships are based on connection. It's a pretty inspiring vision.
It is, and it might sound idealistic. But think about it. What if each of us committed to bringing more presence, more awareness, more compassion into our lives? What kind of impact could we have?
It's like a domino effect. One person's shift in consciousness inspires another, and so on.
Exactly. And we may not see this new consciousness fully realized in our lifetimes, but we can definitely play a part in creating it by doing our own inner work, by choosing love over fear, connection over separation, and presence over distraction.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the power of now. We've covered so much. The mind trap, the pain body, the importance of surrender, the power of those limit situations, and Tolle's vision for a new consciousness. It's amazing how many practical tools and insights we've uncovered, things we can actually use in our lives right now.
It is, and it's a journey we can all take. No matter our background, our beliefs, it's about discovering that power of the present moment, the joy of being, and the potential for transformation that we all carry within us.
So if you're feeling inspired, I encourage you to pick up The Power of Now, explore those chapters that spoke to you, and start putting these principles into practice in your own life. See what happens.
Remember Tolle's message. Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring the power of now.